Doctor Who is a show very near and dear to my heart. I watched it as a kid and have grown up alongside it, and regardless of its ups and downs in quality over the years, nothing will change how much I genuinely love this series, especially the original Russell T Davies run, led by Christopher Eccleston, and then more famously by David Tennant. Doctor Who is one of the most unique television series that I've ever seen, and one of the main reasons for that is the constantly changing lead actor. The Doctor is a Time Lord, and one of the aspects of the Time Lord race is that when their body is fatally injured, instead of dying, they regenerate, which leads to them getting a new face and body, complete with a slightly new personality to boot. Now, the Doctor's regeneration has been shown in many different ways over the show's entire run, but for modern Doctor Who, it's been exclusively shown as a massive burst of fiery energy that shoots out the Doctor's head and hands. It's an extremely explosive passing of the torch between two actors, and acts as both a goodbye to the Doctor that you've been watching for years, and a hello to the new Doctor who you'll hopefully be watching for years to come. It's the signal to the audience that an era has ended and a new one has begun. Given that it's such an integral part of the show, and that it's happened quite a few times, it got me thinking, which is the best regeneration in Doctor Who? And for me, I feel that it's the 10th Doctor's regeneration that stands head and shoulders above the rest. Now, I should admit that David Tennant is my favourite Doctor. He was the Doctor that I grew up with, and it would take a truly incredible performance as well as exceptional storylines to change that opinion of mine. So do know that I have this bias. However, I'm hoping that I'll be able to explain to you why I think his regeneration is the best in a way that doesn't just come across as he's my favourite Doctor, so his regeneration is automatically my favourite. So, what is my criteria for deciding which regeneration is the best? Well, there are several factors influencing my opinion. First, why is the Doctor regenerating? What has killed him? Has he been exterminated by the Daleks whilst jumping in front of a child to save them? Or has he just stuck a knife in a toaster? Next is the scene itself. How does the Doctor bow out? What does he say? What does he do? What is the audience's reaction to the regeneration? And not just that, what happens after the Doctor regenerates? It takes two to tango in a regeneration. And like I said, the regeneration is a passing of the torch. Does the next actor take that torch and run with it? How is their first seen as the Doctor? I'm not just judging the Doctor's goodbye here, I'm also judging his hello. So with that criteria set, let's jump into why the 10th Doctor's regeneration is the best in the series. First, let's start with why the 10th Doctor regenerates. What is responsible for the 10th Doctor's death? Well, we first have to look before the 10th Doctor's final episode. Also, spoilers for Doctor Who before I forget. Leading up to David Tennant's exit, we had known for a while that his tenure as the Doctor was coming to its end. However, the Doctor himself was also aware that his death was imminent.
And then, Doctor... Oh, but then... He will knock 4 times.
And he was far from ready. In fact, his reluctance to die ultimately led him down a dark path, as shown in the fantastic Water of Mars episode.
3 knocks is all you're getting!
The Doctor had changed time and was now declaring himself the Time Lord victorious. And when told that what he was doing was wrong, he simply responded,
Tough.
Fortunately, he snapped out of it and realised what he'd become. But this just goes to show how afraid this version of the Doctor was of death, that even for a second he considered altering time just because it might mean that he could avoid it. So then, in his final 2 episodes, the Doctor confides his fear in Wilf, the man who he'd be proud to call father, as he faced the Master, the man who he assumed would be responsible for his death, since the Master had the sound of drums ringing in his ear. And then he faces both the Master and the Time Lords, and wins. And then, when he realises he's still alive, he's overcome with relief and joy. Yet his jubilation turns to horror when he hears those 4 dreaded knocks. Wilf, a man the Doctor considered his equal, had gotten himself trapped helping someone, and the only way to free Wilf was for the Doctor to go in the area next to him and take a ton of radiation and die. Understandably, the Doctor loses it in one of the best moments in the entire show.
I could do so much more! So much more! But this is what I get. My reward. But it's not fair!
The Doctor may have lost his way a little near the end, but at no point does he ever consider leaving Wilf to die. He's angry because he knows it'd be so easy to do just that, but he also knows that there's no way he's leaving Wilf. So this Doctor so afraid of death, this Doctor who has lived such a short life compared to his other regenerations, steps into the chamber and sacrifices himself so that an old man could live. This Doctor dies in a way most befitting of who the Doctor really is. He dies saving someone, and you can just see how much pain he is in as the radiation floods into him. So already you can hopefully tell that the 10th Doctor has an excellent reason behind his regeneration. He gets full marks for that. So now we know why he's regenerating and our emotions have been built by his sacrifice. How is the actual regeneration scene? Well, after visiting all his companions and taking one last look at Rose, the Doctor hobbles into his TARDIS as the Ood play a song for him. It's such a beautiful piece of music that perfectly sets the mood, and then, without any words spoken, he throws his coat to the side, gets the TARDIS going with just a few switch clicks. He takes one final look at the TARDIS console as it starts travelling, and then he takes his very final steps as the Doctor, before we push in as this Doctor says his very final words.
I don't want to go.
And then we get this fiery explosion as his regeneration destroys the TARDIS around him, a perfect representation of not just the Doctor's feelings, but the audience's too. By this point in modern Doctor Who, we'd only had two Doctors, Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant. This wasn't the first regeneration that audiences at the time had dealt with, but the 10th Doctor's regeneration was very different to the 9th's, and both were reflective of the audience's feelings on the situation. When Christopher Eccleston was the Doctor, the show was a big hit. However, things fell apart very quickly. His relationship with the showrunner and producer broke down irreparably, and he chose to leave the show. On the 30th of March 2005, 4 days after the first episode Rose was released, it was confirmed that Christopher Eccleston would be leaving the role of the Doctor, allegedly due to fear of being typecast. This meant that for almost the entirety of Eccleston's run, people knew he was leaving the role, which meant that when it came time for him to regenerate, the emotion that viewers were likely feeling was anxiety. The first season with him had been so good. Would the show survive without him? He's really good in the role. Who even is this David Tennant fella? I've never seen Casanova, he was apparently good in that, and so Christopher Eccleston's regeneration reflects that. Because unlike 10, the 9th Doctor has a companion with him. He has Rose, and so instead of focusing on himself, he focuses on her. He tells her about what's happening to him and calms her and reassures her. But that's not just for Rose, that's for the audience too. It's okay. Everything's going to be okay, even if I'm not here anymore. And then he explodes into his regeneration and turns into David Tennant. By the time we got to David Tennant's regeneration, the show was at its peak popularity, and David Tennant had already cemented himself as one of the most iconic and popular Doctors in the show's history. A fact that still hasn't changed and is arguably more true now than it was back then. Basically, David Tennant was the Doctor. People saw him as the character and couldn't bear to say goodbye to him, and that is what's reflected in the 10th Doctor's regeneration. He doesn't want to go because audiences really didn't want him to go either, and that's why there's no goodbye speech from this Doctor. No real last words of reflection, just the music playing as both he and us hope for the inevitable to take just a little longer. And then when it becomes clear that it's about to happen, he finally lets out the words,
I don't want to go.
reflecting every person watching that episode live. And then just that final touch of his eyes staring up, taking every last detail of his final moments in, refusing to close for so long, and then they finally shut, just as Matt Smith arrives. Perfect. So we've got an amazing death for the 10th Doctor through him sacrificing himself. We've got an amazing final scene for the 10th Doctor showing his fear and his pain, and emotions being reflected beautifully in the score and the destruction of the TARDIS around him. And then we've got the entire audience watching, completely in sync with the emotions of the moment. All this alone could be enough to cement the 10th Doctor's regeneration as the best in the entire series. But then there's the last piece of the puzzle, the icing on the cake, is the introduction to the 11th Doctor. Like I said before, a regeneration is both a goodbye to a Doctor and a hello to the next one. And in the span of basically a minute, Matt Smith takes the torch passed to him by David Tennant and crushes it. First, he comes into the world screaming, the only time I think I've seen a Doctor do this, which shows the very last bits of the 10th Doctor leaving the world. The last of his pain shown at the start of 11th's life. And then the Doctor begins hurriedly inspecting himself, discovering who he is during all the chaos, which is the best way to describe the 11th Doctor in my opinion. Always preoccupied with something whilst the world burns around him, always missing the obvious, which is also shown by the fact that it takes him a second to remember that the TARDIS is actually crashing, and the music completely switches up too, and then we watch as he excitedly runs over to the TARDIS console and shouts out his catchphrase. It is a brilliant transition, one that becomes even better on a rewatch when the emotions of saying goodbye to the 10th Doctor have left you. Like the 9th Doctor's last speech to Rose, this bit with 11 acts as a way of relaxing the audience. It may be a different actor, but this is still the Doctor, and yes, he's still annoyed that he's not Ginger.
I'm still not Ginger.
An era may have ended, but this first scene with 11 was more than enough to let people know that the future would continue to be bright with this Doctor at the wheel of the TARDIS. So there you have it. All my reasons for why I think the 10th Doctor's Regeneration is the best in the series. However, before we wrap things up, I thought that I'd quickly rank the other Regenerations so that you got my thoughts on them too. However, I will only be ranking modern Doctor Who Regenerations, as I don't think it would be fair to me to rank the classic Doctor Who Regenerations, given that I haven't watched a lot of classic Who, and don't have the same connection with a lot of those Doctors as I do the modern ones. So, in 8th place is easily the 14th Doctor's Regeneration, or should I say, Bi-Generation. Now I'm going to be honest, I don't like the idea of the Bi-Generation. 1, because now we're following the clone, and 2, because I'm constantly thinking about what 14 is up to. Literally, in 73 yards, when 15 goes missing, all I could think was why don't they get 14 involved? And that is going to happen again and again, especially if stakes get much higher in future episodes. But regardless of my thought on the Bi-Generation idea, this one would easily take last place even if he regenerated normally. First, the Doctor gets shot by a laser, which happened very quickly, and he starts regenerating even quicker, and then his goodbye is rushed too. Basically, this was a rush regeneration, purely because it wasn't actually a regeneration, and although I actually quite like Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor, his first scene as the Doctor is completely overshadowed by the fact that David Tennant is still there, so this easily gets last place, because in my opinion, the reason for his death is weak, his goodbye is weak because it's not a goodbye, the hello to the new Doctor is weak because he's overshadowed by being in the same scene as the most popular Doctor, and the audience reaction will be one of three things: confusion, annoyance that it's not a proper regeneration, or happiness that David Tennant is still around, which will then lead to confusion when you realise that he's not actually sticking around, so why did he not regenerate properly? Easiest placement on the rankings for me. 7th place goes to the War Doctor's Regeneration. I'll admit I've only included this one because I said I would include all modern regenerations, so this one counts by default. The regeneration itself is fine, but given the lack of audience connection to this Doctor, I think this is where it should go. Now we get controversial with 6th place, which I'm giving to the 12th Doctor, which will fairly annoy a lot of people, as Peter Capaldi was a great Doctor, and his regeneration is not bad at all. In fact, outside of 14, I think every modern Doctor has had a good regeneration scene, but based on my criteria, it takes 6th place. Firstly, because of how he dies. Whilst the Doctor sacrifices himself, I don't like that he goes out in a literal blaze of glory. It's a little too action hero for me, and I also don't like that he's literally blowing up the Cybermen. The Doctor doesn't kill, at least for me, not even Cybermen. It also doesn't help that the special effects for the 12th Doctor's death, from the explosions to the laser that kills him, even the regeneration energy of his hand, just does not look good. But I will say this, Peter Capaldi absolutely crushed it in the acting for this scene, and he continues to do so in his regeneration scene too. It's a brilliant piece of acting from Peter Capaldi, and his speech is genuinely great. But I don't like the camera work and how much the Doctor moves in his final moments. Most regenerations are still and calm. Even 10, who is so brimming with emotion, moves slowly during his regeneration. 12 is just a little too erratic, and I know I'm nitpicking here, but I don't like how 12 just ever so slowly goes into his regeneration position. And then we get to 13's introduction, which actually starts quite strong, until the TARDIS starts falling apart and she falls out of it. Why does that even happen? The TARDIS seemed fine for quite a while there, and then just all of a sudden throws her out and explodes. Basically, I don't like it because we get such little time to reflect on the regeneration before we're thrown into the next piece of action. 5th place is going to the 13th Doctor's regeneration. They lose points for their death scene because the Doctor dies from taking a laser to the face. It's just a bit random. Other times the Doctor dies due to sacrifice or old age. Here she dies because the Master pressed a button that caused the thing in the sky to alter its aim, or something. I don't know how it works. Fortunately, the actual regeneration scene is quite good. The Doctor gives a short but sweet speech and then regenerates to some genuinely beautiful music. Although since I did it with 12, I'll also be doing it with 13. I don't like how 13 gets into a regeneration T-pose. I wish it was more snappy and less flowy. But the effects are really good, and then we get David Tennant back as the Doctor, which is a pleasant surprise for some people, as Ncuti Gatwa had been announced as the Doctor at this point. But David returns to the Doctor as if he is a well-worn glove, and his comments about his teeth and his exclaims of "What?" were just the perfect way to bring him back. It's a nice goodbye to a very divisive and controversial Doctor and era, and a very exciting hello to the next Doctor to come. I struggled a little with the next 2 Doctors, but I'm giving 4th place to the 11th Doctor's regeneration. First, I love that the youngest actor to play the Doctor dies of old age. His initial regeneration is fantastic. It's a great speech and a wonderful bit of acting from Matt Smith as we watch this old, hopeless man suddenly regains the energy of his youth once he realises that he's going to regenerate once again. Then the Doctor goes nuclear and it's amazing. Given that the Doctor has stayed in this place for so long protecting people, I chalk it up as another bit of self-sacrifice. Then we have the actual regeneration scene itself. I absolutely love 11's speech. And then we see Amy again, and it's so emotional. Again, this isn't just the end of 11, but his era too. So of course we say goodbye to Amy too. And of course, Rory is forgotten as always. But Clara is really good here too, not wanting to say goodbye to her friend. And it is brilliant. But then he sneezes into Peter Capaldi, and that sort of ruins this regeneration a little for me. I know he already did the regeneration technically, but I wish the transition into Peter Capaldi was actually more of a transition and not so much of a jump cut. But I do like the introduction to 12, especially this line. It's just that sneeze into Capaldi did knock a lot of wind out of this scene's sails, at least for me. And by this point, audiences were now a lot more used to regenerations, so we're a lot more calmer, just like this scene is compared to the last 2 regenerations. Bronze medal goes to the 9th Doctor. Now I actually really struggled over which regeneration was better, the 9th Doctor's or the 11th Doctor's. But I've given it to 9 because I think the 11th Doctor's goodbye is better than 9's, but every other aspect of the 9th Doctor's regeneration is better than 11's in my opinion. First we have 9's death. Another bit of self-sacrifice, except this time it's for the woman he loves and the person who is canonically, I believe, to be the most important person the Doctor has or will ever meet in his life. And the dialogue is so good.
My head
Come here.
is killing me.
I think you need a doctor.
Then there's the regeneration scene itself, which I already spoke about earlier, so I'm not going to repeat myself, other than saying that again, I love the reassuring nature of it, and Christopher Eccleston was just fantastic, not just in this scene, but as the Doctor in every episode. Like everyone, I wish we saw more of him. Also, I love that he snaps into the regeneration, and the effects for the regeneration are also probably my favourite in all of Doctor Who. I love how his face turns into 10's, even the way his hair comes in. And then of course we have 10's introduction, where he just comes in and carries on from where 9 left off. It's all really good across the board. Second place goes to the 8th Doctor's regeneration. Admit it, you forgot about this one. But if I'm counting the War Doctor, then I'm definitely counting 8 too. First, I love that he dies because of the Time War. He tries to save someone, but they won't let him, and it gets him killed in the process too. A very excellent death scene. Then we have his regeneration scene, where Paul McGann just kills it. He is so good that it makes you sad to know that we have seen so little of this incarnation of the Doctor, and every second of him only makes you want more. He inhabits the role beautifully, and I like that we basically see the Doctor give up here. The Doctor has always tried to do the right thing, but here he chooses to be the warrior, and then he regenerates in so much pain as he becomes someone so completely different. This regeneration is so high up on my list because first, it's great, but second, I love the wider implications of it. We see a young John Hurt revealing that he'd been the War Doctor for a very long time. The tragedy of Ape's regeneration is finally revealed, and what a sad way for him to go. It is one of the most important regenerations in the show's history, and watching it made me want an entire series with Paul McGann, or at the very least, a multi-Doctor story for an episode. And then of course, number 1 is the 10th Doctor's regeneration, but I've already explained why. Also, I do want to just quickly shout out the 5th Doctor's regeneration. It's a great story, and I love that the Doctor dies due to stepping in a puddle. Feels like a very realistic end for someone travelling through time and space. And again, he sacrificed himself so his companion can live. Also, I love the 5th Doctor's speech, but I'd be lying if I said I was looking at Peter Davison at any point in that scene. And that is the end of the video and my opinions. But what about yours? What regeneration is your favourite? And that can be either a regeneration from Classic Who or New Who. Also, who's your favourite Doctor? And what's your opinion on the current series of Doctor Who with Ncuti Gatwa? Let me know the answers to all those questions, as well as your general thoughts down in the comments below, and whilst you're down there, do be sure to hit the like button. It significantly boosts this video in the YouTube algorithm. And if you're feeling especially generous, then do consider subscribing too. I'm hoping to hit 1000 subscribers before the end of the year, and it's looking very doable. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it, and I do hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.